You better undo your belt and bite it hard because today I have a very special OLED monitor I've been waiting a long time to review because this display could change the way we look at monitors forever, and it's broken me. I cannot look at regular monitors again. But enough throwing hands around the bush. I'm talking about the Spectrum Black 27, which was sent to me for review by Doe, and yes, I'm well aware of the many complaints this company has gotten, and I'll talk about that before I decide to or not to recommend this monitor. But first, we gotta actually see if it's good, and let's start off with the specs. The Doe Spectrum Black 27 is a 27-inch 1440p 240Hz 16:9 MLA WOLED panel with a glossy Gorilla Glass finish, G-Sync and FreeSync compatibility, and a Display HDR True Black 400 certification. In terms of the design, it's very minimalist, and overall, I think Doe is far ahead of the competition in this regard with their sleek, non-gamer aesthetic, and it is mostly plastic, so I'm very interested to see their upcoming aluminum housing that should be shipping with their 32-inch model soon, but I digress. As for the stand, you actually need to purchase this one separately for a pretty wild additional $100, but if you do, yes, it does everything you would expect and looks great doing it. Additionally, it does support standard VESA mounts, and here's the connectivity situation. Pause if you need to, but be aware the HDMI ports are half bandwidth, so you will need to use DisplayPort to avoid display stream compression issues. So that all sounds great, but what about the price? And here's where the tears are going to start streaming, because the Gorilla Glass version comes in currently at B&H Photo at an eye-watering $1,099.99. Now, it does come with a 3-year general and 2-year burn-in warranty, but I've never attempted to warranty anything with Doe myself, so I hope they're quick and fair, but I guess I won't know until I test it myself. So with such a high price, can this monitor actually compete with stuff like the 360Hz Quantum.OLED alternatives, which when they come back in stock should be available from many companies roughly between $800 to $900? Well, let's look at the performance and see if it's really worth that premium. First, let's talk color. Right away, I'll tell you, this is a WOLED monitor, so like all the other ones I've used, in SDR, it looks great with very accurate and vibrant colors, but due to the white subpixel, in some instances in very bright HDR content, it will fall a bit short in saturation when compared to Quantum.OLED. But this monitor has a unique advantage of using a Gorilla Glass finish, the same type of thing you would see on your phone, which when applied to the monitor correctly can lead to actually a much richer and more vibrant image overall than the quite muddy, blurry, and low contrast looking WOLED matte finish from LG and other companies, which really sacrifices a lot of image quality to try and diffuse reflections with that horrendous matte coating, an issue which can be completely avoided by using Gorilla Glass. Now, as for the accuracy of the panel, it's actually nearly perfect in the sRGB mode, but in HDR, it's a different story, as it overbrightens mid to high APL scenes, leading to an inaccurate HDR presentation, though I was informed by Doe that a firmware update will be available soon to correct this. But if you want to know the best settings for this display, I will have them linked in my Patreon in the description below, which also gets you access to the Discord and helps fund future reviews, so thank you to everybody who supports me there. Now, as for the color volume, it is pretty good in SDR, reaching nearly 95% DCI-P3, but again, it's gonna fall short in HDR, likely due to that white subpixel getting around just 69%, far lower than what you would see on Quantum.OLED. But now let's talk about the most important metric for OLED monitors. That's brightness. This is going to be a huge deal for HDR impact and general day-to-day usage. So let's start off by talking about the peak HDR brightness, which the 1% window represents the maximum brightness you might see in a darker scene, and the 10% window is often closer to real-world maximum game brightness. And looking at the chart here, we can see that it is closer to the top and is actually very, very impressive, coming in just behind the newer MLA version 2 panel that you see in the Asus PG34 WCDM. We're talking nearly 1,000 nits brightness on this thing, not only in the 1%, but also getting close in the 10% as well. And that is basically almost double the brightness of what we see in a 10% window for Quantum.OLED. And while Quantum.OLED does have the color advantage, That's such a massive gap that it doesn't matter. It's gonna look a lot brighter on this WOLED panel. And in terms of a 100% window, which is the most important metric for daily use in bright scenes, here once again, very impressive, coming in with 322 nits on the Spectrum Black 27, actually well outperforming every single other OLED on the list. But now let's take a look at real world HDR brightness in Baldur's Gate 3, and this is actually without a doubt the brightest OLED monitor I've ever measured, just edging out the 2nd gen MLA Asus model and actually delivering a whopping 70% higher brightness on the terrain and around 13% higher peak brightness than the Alienware 4K 240Hz Quantum Dot OLED, showing that when pushed hard enough, LG definitely has a massive brightness advantage on their monitors, albeit again at a lower color volume. And not only is this monitor brighter than all the others, but you still get the per pixel local dimming and infinite contrast ratio that can only be delivered by OLED, leading to a fantastic HDR presentation when displaying highlights in a dark environment like stars in the night sky. But is it good for gaming? And in terms of latency, it once again absolutely crushes it with just 24 milliseconds of total system latency, one of the lowest results I've ever measured, making it great for gaming. And it's also very well complemented by the near instant response times of OLED, as you can see here in the motion test, where not only at 240 Hz is it significantly faster than the LCD on the far right there, but also this monitor comes with black frame insertion at 120 Hz, which to me looks just as good as the 240 Hz in motion. However, this means you only need to run it at 120 Hz to get the same motion performance as 240 Hz, meaning you need half the GPU power. Very impressive stuff, although of course you will get the latency of 120 Hz, and it does impact the brightness. So if you want the maximum brightness and the lowest latency, you still will need to run it at 240 Hz. Now, in terms of the text clarity and subpixel layout, it looks like to my eye that this is still GRWB, meaning that yes, there will be text fringing or just general fringing overall. However, I really think the LG's layout has far less fringing than the Quantum Dot OLED alternative, especially at 1440p. It just looks way cleaner and the text looks a lot better in my opinion. Now, the finish, let's talk about that in the perceived clarity. So the finish is really good. However, it turns out I did get, according to Doe, a pre-mass production sample or something like that. So it looks like mine was assembled by hand, and thus there appears to be a slight graininess of the matte coating underneath still that I just simply haven't seen on any of their other Gorilla Glass models so far. So I'm sure you're probably gonna say in the comments, don't believe them, this is gonna have matte grain underneath, but there's two things I wanna say in response to that. One, when I say a slight grain, I mean it's maybe 20% of the grain that I would regularly notice on a full matte finish, and I am actually gonna choose to believe them on this one, and the reason why is because I do have their previous Doe Spectrum 1, and on that thing, I can't see any grain at all, and that's a higher resolution, so I think I would actually notice it even more if that were the case. So they are going to actually go ahead and send me another unit that's the mass production version that's been assembled by a machine, and I will go ahead and compare them once I get it in my hands, but do be aware it's really hard to capture this stuff on camera. But honestly, even the one I have in front of me right now is far better than a full matte coating coming from LG directly. But anyway, overall the clarity I would say is just way better than the matte coating. And yeah, this is a huge step up, and if they are telling the truth and the machine assembled ones are a lot cleaner, this is gonna be potentially the best coating you can possibly get, because this thing is insane. The amount of ambient light handling that it can do is really good. I've seen it both on their LCD as well as this OLED version, and in both cases it seems to handle ambient light very well. Unlike Quantum OLED, as you can see right next to it, it does not have the magenta tinting when the lights are on. So this means, and this is important guys, you can turn your lights on in your room and still get the pure blacks of OLED without that lifted magenta tint that I know a lot of people, myself included, have been complaining about with Quantum OLED. But assuming that it's assembled correctly, you will also get the benefits of a glossy display as well, meaning far higher clarity and better perceived vibrancy, saturation, contrast, all that sort of stuff that comes with glossy as well. So this really feels like a nice middle ground between the matte and the glossy of the Quantum Dot OLEDs, giving you kind of the best of both worlds, again, assuming that it's been assembled to perfection. Now, in terms of the uniformity, while WOLED can have some uniformity issues, I didn't notice any of that weird pink tinting or a ton of weird stuff on darker shades. So this might actually be one of the cleanest panels I've seen from an LG OLED. But now let's talk about a few other issues I found with this display. So yeah, we have the slight grain on my model that hopefully will be resolved on the mass production units, as I did get, again, one assembled by hand apparently. It does also have incorrect EOTF tracking. And then finally, one other issue I found was that for whatever reason on DisplayPort right now, display stream compression is still locked on. And I was told this is a bug that will also be fixed next week. So hopefully that gets fixed. And if that and the EOTF tracking get fixed and the slight grain for my model, yeah, this is going to be an absolutely wild panel, because we're talking about something that has far better clarity, way higher brightness, and way better ambient light handling, in my opinion, when compared to the Quantum Dot OLED alternatives. But of course, you do get, at least on my current model, without the firmware fixes and mass production machine assembly, the slight grain, the DSC, as well as the incorrect EOTF, and it's 240 Hz versus 360 Hz on Quantum Dot OLED. So I don't think I can go ahead and say, at least right now, the model that I have is definitely better than the 360 Hz Quantum Dot OLEDs. It has its strengths, which I really, really like, but it also falls short in a few categories until those get fixed. Now, should you actually buy this? And here's where we have to talk about dough. I want to tell you yes, because I really like this monitor, and I honestly, with my own money, would buy this over the 360 Hz versions, as I'm not too pressed about 240 versus 360 Hz, and I think the overall image quality is much, much higher. However, there's been a lot of complaints about dough in the past, and I did go ahead and put together a short poll. Now, if we do the math, it looks like only about 94 people on this poll actually attempted to purchase something from dough. And that's not a lot of data, but if we're even going to be generous, it looks like about 40% of those people claim to have not received a product or a refund. That's a big issue. Now, again, this is a small amount of people, and sure, it's possible that on a larger scale, it's not nearly this bad, as angry people respond far more than happy people in general, but I feel like that's still no excuse. I think if I did this with any other company, I would not get results like this. So the good news is, though, all you got to do to fix this is actually continue to deliver monitors as you've told me you have been doing since it's been listed on B&H Photo. And if that turns out to be the case and everybody's getting their monitors, or if they don't get it, they get a refund, this will fix itself real fast. And then I'll be able to very, very heartily recommend your monitors, as I do think in a lot of ways they're way above the competition, especially in terms of like clarity, brightness, build quality, reflection handling. All that stuff is just so good, but you gotta fix that reputation. But now that they are on B&H, I would be a lot less worried about it, as B&H is a very reputable company, and as far as I'm aware, they're not gonna just let you get ripped off. Like, if you buy something from B&H and you don't receive it, I'm pretty sure they're gonna have your back. I would assume so. They're a very reputable company. But at the end of the day, whether you want to buy it or not, that's your decision. I'll have it linked in the description below. I really like the product. I hope those few things get fixed, and I hope that dough continues to improve upon its brand reputation so that in the future, I can just heartily recommend them without any asterisks. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, RuPro has you covered with their certified 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable, available in sizes of up to 50 feet and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K 60 FPS or 4K 144 FPS 10-bit HDR video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports ER. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out RuPro on Amazon today.